Okay, geometry class, this is section 1-3. The main idea of this section is talking about midpoints. There is a formula for midpoint. It's down here. We'll talk about that here in just a minute. But midpoints and midpoint formula and distance formula are the two formulas from this chapter that I really want to make sure that you guys have memorized and know how to use. Yesterday, the distance formula looked something like this. You should be working on memorizing it. Let's see, square root. Let's do square root. Square root of x2 minus x1 squared plus y2 minus y1 squared. Okay, that was the distance formula. You need to make sure that you have that memorized. So this formula and this formula, the midpoint formula, those two you will be quizzed over tomorrow. I will expect you to have those memorized. So commit those to memory today. Make sure you have those memorized for tomorrow. All right. So this was distance formula. This was yesterday. Today we're going to be talking about midpoint. So example 1, they want you to find the midpoint on a number line. This is just an introduction into what midpoint means. Find the midpoint of AB. A is located here and B is located here. You can kind of see where those are. The edges of the picture, whatever we're trying to hang here. And A is 15 units from the left, so that's a distance of 15. B is 37.5 units from the left. Okay, they give us that information so that we can find a point in between them, somewhere in here, located exactly in the center, so that when I hang this picture using this point, the painting will hang straight. Okay, and this point right here is exactly in the middle. It is the midpoint. Okay. To find the midpoint, I can look at 15 and I can look at 35 and I can count over and try to find exactly in the middle. Or finding the midpoint is like finding the average. Okay, it's exactly in the middle. All right, if I'm trying to find the average of two things, I just add them together and divide by 2. 15 plus 37.5, and I would divide that by 2. 15 plus 37.5, I don't know, 50. 2.5 divided by 2 is 26.25 inches. So if I were to find the midpoint, I would measure over 26.25 inches, and it would give me exactly that spot. All right. When you're doing the midpoint formula, you're doing exactly what I just did up above here. You're taking these two values and you're adding them together and dividing by 2. Except when you do the midpoint formula, a lot of times you're doing it with 2 points. So like they give us S and T down below, all right? So what I'm going to do is to find the new X and Y coordinate for my new middle point of S and T. I'm going to add the X's together and divide by 2, and I'm going to add the Y's together and divide by 2. This is again like finding the average. Okay. If it helps to think of it this way, say I was trying to find, let's say I was given 2 grades. My grades were an 80 and an 86, and I said find the midpoint of those 2 grades. Okay, find the midpoint of 80 and 86. What you would do is add those two together and divide by 2, and you would find that it was 83. Okay, so midpoint is exactly like finding the average. Here you're just averaging the x's together, averaging the y's together, right? So to find my new x and y, my first x coordinate is -6 out of here. So I'm going to take -6 and I'm going to add it to my second x coordinate, which is 1. -6 plus 1, and I divide that by 2. That's going to give me my new x coordinate, all right? My y coordinate, my first y is 3. So I'm going to take 3 and I'm going to add that to 0, which is my second y coordinate, and divide that by 2. So my new coordinates are -6 plus 1 is 5 over 2, comma, 3 plus 0 is 3 over 2. Or if you want to write that as a decimal, that's 2.5, comma, 1.5. Those are the new coordinates of your midpoint. This point right here is exactly in the middle of those two. It's averaging them together. All right. Now they switch it around on you, and they say find the new coordinates of J if K is -1, 2, and if J is the midpoint of J, L, and L has the coordinates of blah, blah, blah. So here they're giving us this guy right here is our midpoint. All right, so we're going to set this up as equal to -1, 2. Just like we had over here, we're going to work backwards. So we're trying to find a coordinate for j if k is -1, 2. Okay. Now j is the is the first coordinate, is the x1 coordinate. I'm going to set this up like this. We're going to divide both of them by 2, divide both of them by 2. All right. They give me only one of the points here, 3 and -5. So what I would do if they gave me the other point or the coordinates for j, I would take 3 and I would subtract that coordinate, and I would take -5 and I would subtract that coordinate, dividing both of them by 2 to get -1, 2. Okay? Here we don't know what they are, so I'm just going to call them x and y. All right? So what we want to have happen is 3 minus x divided by 2 has to be equal to -1. 3 minus x divided by 2 has to be equal to -1. Right? To solve for this x, we're going to do a little bit of algebra. We're going to multiply both sides by 2 to get rid of that 2 in the bottom there. 3 minus x is equal to -1 times 2 is -2. And if I subtract 3 from both sides, negative x is equal to -5. So positive x is equal to 5. Okay, that gives me my x coordinate. All right, now I'm going to do the same thing again, but I'm going to do it with the y coordinate. So -5 minus y divided by 2 is equal to 2. -5 minus y divided by 2 is equal to 2. All right. Now I'm going to, again, multiply both sides by 2 to get rid of that 2. -5 minus y equals 4. If I add 5 to both sides, I get -y equals 9. And dividing by -1, divided by -1, y equals -9. Let me move this up here. Y equals -9. So the point 5 comma -9 is the other point that I need to have in order to have a midpoint of -1 comma 2. The coordinates of j are 5, -9. So you're kind of working backwards in order to get that 5, -9. Okay? If that was confusing at all, you might want to rewind the video just a little bit and go through that again, or ask somebody that did understand it to explain that to you. I went through that kind of fast. So rewind that video so you can see 5, -9, and that'll help you do problems like this on the homework assignment. Okay? Example 4. Oh, shoot, let me open this up so you guys have it bigger. I'm sorry. Find the measure of PQ. So ultimately we want to find the measure of this guy. And it tells me the important information is that Q is the midpoint of PR. Q is the midpoint of PR. He is exactly in the middle. So if he is exactly in the middle, then this distance right here should be exactly the same as this distance right here. 9y minus 2 should be exactly equal to 14 plus 5y. Those two measurements should be equivalent. All right. Now we're just simply solving for y. So I solve for y by, let's say, subtracting 5y. So I get 4y minus 2 equals 14. Then I would add 2 to both sides. This is just basic algebra. 4y equals 16. And divide by 4, y equals 4. Okay? Now, y equals 4 is my answer, except it's not asking for what y is. It's asking for find the measure of PQ. So make sure you reread the problem at the end to make sure you're answering the question that it asks. PQ is 9y minus 2. 9y minus 2. I'm going to plug 4 in for y. If I plug 4 in, 9 times 4 is 36. And 36 minus 2 is 34. Okay, so 34 is the measurement from P to Q. Now, if they would ask for QR, you're more than welcome to plug that 4 into the y coordinate here. But since this is 34 and this is the midpoint, this has to also be 34. Okay, you don't have to go and plug the 4 back into the y and figure out that this is 34 also. It's going to be the same. All right. Okay, so example 5, 5, 6, and 7, the two examples on the backside plus this example are going to be a little bit trickier, I guess, when you're trying to find a fractional distance. So they're taking x, some point x, that lives from A to F, and they are trying to find where he is located if he is 1/6 of the distance from A to F. Okay, so let's figure out how long of a distance it is from A to F. It's going from -7 to +5. So what I do is I take 5 and I subtract that -7, and I take the absolute value of it. That would be like 5 plus 7. So there are 12 units from A to F. Okay, now if I'm only wanting to go 1/6 of the distance from A to F, 1/6 of 12 is like multiplying by 1/6. That's 2 units. So I'm only going 2 units away from A, to plot where X is. 2 units away from A would be 1, 2. X is going to be located right here at -5. Okay, so find the entire distance and then multiply that by your fraction that you are wanting and locate your X there. So X is going to be on the point -5. Okay, all right, backside. You're doing exactly the same thing, but now you have a line that is not completely horizontal. You're actually going to have some distance. So find R on NM. R is going to be located somewhere between these 2 points, somewhere between those 2 points. And we want it to be 1/4 of the distance from N to M. All right, so imagine that I would like split this into 4 pieces. Okay, 1/4 of the distance, he's going to be located somewhere right there on that point. We've got to figure out what that point is. Okay, so this point is going to have a coordinate that is an X coordinate and a Y coordinate. All right, and we've got to find what each one of those is. So to do that, I look and I say, okay, how many units? I make this into a triangle. How many units am I going over in the X direction? I'm going from -3 to +2 in the X direction. That's 5 units, okay, that I'm going in the X direction. In the Y direction, I'm going from -3 to +3. So I'm going 6 units in the Y direction, all right? So 5 units in the X direction, 6 units in the Y direction, all right? If I'm only wanting 1/4 of the distance, if I take 5 units in the X direction and multiply by 1/4, 5 times 1/4 is 1.25, okay? So I want to be 1.25 units over in this direction to get that new coordinate here, all right? If my X coordinate on N is -3 to start with, I'm going to add 1.25 to that to get my new X coordinate, which is this point here. -3 plus 1.25 is -1.75. That's my new X coordinate, all right? My Y coordinate, if this length here is 6, I want to take 1/4 of 6. 1/4 of 6 is 1.5. So I'm going to add 1.5 units to the current Y coordinate of -3. -3 plus 1.5 gives me a -1.5 for my new Y coordinate. And my coordinates for this point right here, if it's 1/4 the distance, if this is 1/4, and the rest of it is like 3/4, this is 3/4 of the rest of the distance. This new point right here, 1/4, would be at the point -1.75, comma, -1.5. I just took that fraction of each distance here that I'm going along the X, going along the X and going along the Y, took that fraction, 1/4 of each of those, and added that to either the X coordinate or the Y coordinate to get my new points, okay? All right, the last one is exactly the same thing, except we have a different ratio. So 1 to 4 is what I want my distances to be.
Teachers, the juniors and seniors are back, so please admit them into class.
Okay, sorry for that announcement. A is here, B is here. They want us to find C such that the ratio from A to C to B is 1 to 4. So instead of this being split into 4 pieces now, okay, it's actually split into one piece here and 4 pieces here, making it a total of 5 pieces. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 approximately. There's five different sections that I'm sectioning that line segment into. Okay, and I want my CV. Yes?
Okay, Jamie Kirshner couldn't find it. She's on her way.
Okay. I want to find the coordinates of this point right here. So what I'm really doing is the same thing as what I did up here, but I'm multiplying by 1/5 instead. So the coordinates for AB are at -4, 6, -4, 6, and the coordinates of B are at 1, 2, 1, 2. So from this point to this point, the x's and the y's, I am going in the x direction 5 units, and in the y direction, I am going, let's say, 4 units, okay? So 4 units in the x direction. In the y direction, I'm going 5 units, okay? I'm going to multiply each one of those by 1/5, okay? 1/5, 1/5. 4/5 is 0.8, so I'm going to take that 0.8 and I'm going to add that on to A, because I want it to be going over there, all right? 0.8 plus -4 is -3.2. That's going to be my new x coordinate. My new y coordinate, 1/5 of 5 is 1. I'm going to add that to 6. And my new coordinate, hold on. Oh, excuse me, I'm going to subtract 1 from 6 because I'm going down in this direction. So it will give me a new coordinate of 5. So my new points will be -3.2, or -3.2, 5. All right.
Sorry for the interruption. For those students that were gone,